Okay, rabbi say our topic is Pesach Sheini. That's our topic. Because today we're doing what's called Yom Pagra, special days. Pesach Sheini is Friday. Thursday we learned Tanya, and I was asked by the school that we should do Pesach Sheini today, so that's what we're doing. I want to start off with a very funny little detail about the minhagim of Pesach Sheini. It's a small little nuance. But I have over here from the Rebbe, the custom is, Pesach Sheini is Friday. Friday is Yud Daled Iyar. And there's a custom by Yidden to eat Matza on Pesach Sheini. You wash, you eat Matza, etc. Yeah? Problem is, think about the history. Yidden brought a carbon Pesach Sheini, Yud Daled Iyar. When did they eat the carbon? When did they eat the carbon Pesach? At night, right? In other words, they actually didn't eat the carbon Pesach till it was already Tezvov Iyar. When do we have Pesach Rishon? When do we make Pesach? Yud Daled Nisan is Erev Pesach. Tezvov Nisan is Pesach. So l'cha'oira Pesach Sheini should be the same thing. If Pesach Sheini is Yud Daled Iyar, we shouldn't eat matzah on Pesach Sheini. We should eat Pesach Sheini matzah Pesach Sheini. In other words, you could make a real argument that you should eat the Pesach Sheini, the matzah, not Yud Daled Friday, but Friday night, because that's when the Pesach Sheini was eaten. And the Rebbe mentions this, and the Rebbe brings also from the Munkacher, who the Rebbe held very, very highly of, the Minchas Halazar, that he would wash and eat matzah on Pesach Sheini. And the explanation that they give is because even though in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, the matzah was eaten, the carbon was eaten by night, Tezvov, we're just making a zeicha for Pesach Sheini, and you do it in the beginning. In other words, you don't make the zeicha Pesach Sheini when Yidden ate the matzah on Pesach Sheini, ate the carbon Pesach. You make the zeicha when Yidden began to be makriv the carbon. So you have a very strange thing here. We're eating matzah Pesach Sheini, even though in the times that they had a Pesach Sheini, they ate it Tezvov, which is unusual. It's weird. A pnimi is the hezber for why this works out. In other words, what is the reason we're eating Pesach Sheini, eating matzah on Pesach Sheini when we should really eating matzah the next day? The only note that the Rebbe makes about this is because you want to do it at the beginning of the occasion. But haguf akasha, I mean, why would you do it at the beginning of the occasion if the beginning of the occasion was being makriv the carbon? If the beginning of the occasion was that when they ate the carbon at night. So I'm just throwing this out there. It's just one of those things that every year you sit down to eat matzah Pesach Sheini and you always ask the same question. Why are we eating matzah now? We should eat the matzah tonight. And everyone says, I don't know. And then the next year you do it all over again. So Pesach Sheini has right away akasha. Yeah. So now you have a whole speech. We all know that Pesach has to be questions and answers. Pesach has two rules. Rule number one is about the children. And rule number two is b'derech shaylo tshuva. As they say in Chumash, v'hayir ki yisholcha. The whole Pesach Seder is about the kids, and the kids are supposed to ask questions. So how does Pesach Sheini have questions? So we don't have four kashas, but we have one kasha of Pesach Sheini. The kasha is, why are we eating matzah Yud Daled? We should be eating matzah Tezvov. And the answer is, latmiyati noikes, the kids should have what to ask. So Pesach Sheini is like Pesach Rishon in one more aspect. Okay, that's tongue-in-cheek. That's a Milsa de B'dicha said. Don't take that very seriously. But it is something which is written about in Sfarim, that the custom is you eat matzah not when they ate the Pesach Sheini. You eat matzah when they were makriv the Pesach Sheini, even though they ate it the following night. Now, there is a Mishnah, right? There's a Mishnah in a Gemara which asks the question. There's a Mishnah in a Gemara which asks the question. I'm reading a Mishnah inside, okay? This is Daf Tzadikei Mesechta Pesachim. Ma bein Pesach Harishon l'Sheni. What's the difference between Pesach, which is Tezvov Nisan, and Pesach, which is Tezvov Iyar? And the Gemara answers, Harishon, the first Pesach, Osor b'Ba'al Yero u'Ba'al Yemotze. You're not allowed to have, you're not allowed to see, and you're not allowed to find chometz in your house. V'hasheni, Pesach Sheini, Chometz u'matzah imei b'bayis, you can have chometz and matzah together. Now, if you're familiar with the chumash, when they ate the Korban Pesach itself, the Korban Pesach Sheini was also eaten only with matzah. Al matzah is redim yechluhu. You couldn't eat it with chometz, but you didn't have to get chometz out of your house. The halacha was, if you went to the Beis HaMikdash and you brought a Korban Pesach Rishon and you had chometz in your house, you got malchus. Pesach Sheini, you didn't have to get rid of your chometz. Harishain ton halal b'achilosei. The first Korban Pesach, when you ate it, you had to sing and praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'hashenei eini ton halal b'achilosei. The Korban Pesach Sheini did not have to have a halal when you were eating it. However, v'zeh, both of them, ton halal b'asiyasan, when they made the Korban, they said halal. V'nechol tzali, it was eaten roasted, al matzah samreidim, al matzah samodar, v'deichin as Shabbos. Here's a Mishnah that lists the similarities and the differences between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheini. And basically it says two things. Number one, Pesach Rishon, you were not allowed to have chometz any place in your home. Pesach Sheini, you just didn't eat the Korban Pesach with chometz, but you could have chometz in your home. Number two, when you ate the Korban Pesach, you didn't have to say halal. When we make our Seder, our custom of course is we say halal at night. By the Pesach Seder, we say first halal before the meal. In the second half halal, beginning leilonu, we say after benching. In the times of the Beis HaMikdash, when they ate their Korban Pesach, they said halal. So I have to give you a class on Pesach Sheini. So I want to talk about these two things. What is the significance that Pesach Sheini you were allowed to have chometz? And what is the significance that Pesach Sheini you didn't have to say halal? And the answer to both of these questions is because Pesach Sheini is higher than Pesach Rishon. How is Pesach Sheini higher than Pesach Rishon? Pesach Sheini is higher than Pesach Rishon, that Pesach Sheini did not require you to go away from your regular life. When you did Pesach Rishon, you had Pesach, you had to clean your house, you had days of Yom Tov, you couldn't do Malacha. In order to experience Pesach, you had to be in an extraordinary state. One of the aspects of the extraordinary state you needed to be in order to experience Pesach, was that you couldn't have chometz. Chometz, as you know, represents gaiva, but chometz does not only represent gaiva. Chometz also represents tam. You know what tam means? Taste, flavor, pleasantness. So Pesach Rishon, if a person wanted to experience Pesach Rishon, it had to be a Yom Tov. You couldn't have chometz, and you had to say halal. You had to praise Hashem for a special day. Pesach Sheini, you could have chometz in your house, and you didn't have to say halal. So let's think about the significance of this, okay? The meaning of the word Pesach is to jump. The meaning of the word Pesach is to jump. To jump means to go away from what's normal. Pesach Rishon, when a person jumps the first time, they have to completely go out of themselves. The only way to completely go out of yourself is to have Yom Tov, not to have chometz, and to say halal. Pesach Sheini means you're jumping a second time. When you're jumping a second time, so to speak, you're already used to jumping. If you're already used to jumping, you don't have to have special circumstances. It's a regular day. In the morning you went to work, in the afternoon you bring a korban, at night you can go to work again. The next morning you can go to work again. Because the idea of Pesach Sheini, the idea of the second jump, is that you can do it without having to go out of your regular life. Now, I want you to, let me give you something to consider. In our community, in our midst, there are people who are called Ba'al Teshuva. A high percentage of our community is called Ba'al Teshuva. The truth of the matter is, halavai, we should all be Ba'al Teshuva. What's a Ba'al Teshuva? A Ba'al Teshuva is a person who jumped. That's what a Ba'al Teshuva is. A person had one life, and relatively speaking, in a very, very short time, they jumped and they took on a whole different life. That's what a Ba'al Teshuva means. You make a leap. And I've told this to you many times, when I was a teenager, and now I'm a teenager times 3, I'm still intrigued by this. I couldn't understand, and I still don't understand, the process by which a person becomes frum. You know, in the olden times, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, what was a Ba'al Teshuva? A Ba'al Teshuva was a person who was born frum, and for whatever reasons, whatever excuses, he left it, and he came back to it. That's the real meaning of the word Ba'al Teshuva. If you grew up frum, and unfortunately you left it, and you're coming back to it, you understand the term Ba'al Teshuva. But a person who grew up without any Yiddishkeit, at least any overt Yiddishkeit, and they're becoming frum, the truth of the matter is, the word Ba'al Teshuva is a misnomer. They're not a Ba'al Teshuva. Because to be a Ba'al Teshuva, you have to first be connected to Aveda. A Ba'al Teshuva was never frum, never did an Aveda in his life, because he has no idea what an Aveda is. He was never taught. But we use the word Ba'al Teshuva. We call a person who was once not frum, who becomes through a Ba'al Teshuva. This is a person who had one way of life, an American way of life, a European way of life, doesn't matter which, and they change it completely. Minakot, they change everything about themselves. How they dress, how they eat, how they sleep, how they work, everything about their life they change. To me, I mean, this is still a phenomenal thing. A person should completely change his life, to me, is overwhelming. The idea of a Ba'al Teshuva blows my mind. And the truth of the matter is, if you'll speak to a Ba'al Teshuva, they will tell you that the process of doing tshuva is a miracle. When a person does tshuva, it's beyond them. The idea of a person changing their whole life and becoming closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is completely beyond the limitations of a person. It's really a tamatana from the Eibishter. And Ba'al Teshuvas will tell you, a guy once said to me, he says, Rabbi, for a few months I was a Ba'al Teshuva, and then I was like everybody else. The process of doing tshuva is so extraordinary. The idea that a person should completely change his life is a leap, it's a jump. And this jump is motivated by Sayata Deshmaya. The Eibishter gives a koyach for people to be able to do tshuva. But here's the chap, okay? Come to a Ba'al Teshuva who has done tshuva, is a frum person, and say you in your life made a leap. You jumped. You went from one way of life to a completely different way of life. Jump again. Jump a second time. And they will all tell you, I don't know how I jumped the first time, and there's no way I can jump a second time. A person who's experienced, to use Hasidic terminology, a person who's experienced is Yechida Shebenefesh. Yechida, it's a gift from Hashem. It involves a dilik, it involves a jump. That's an amazing thing. But Pesach Sheini, the idea that a person should jump a second time, this is mamish completely beyond comprehension. So that's why the halachas of Pesach Sheini are different than Pesach Rishon. If anybody is in a madrege where they could jump a second time, the limitations of Pesach Rishon, that they're not allowed to have chometz and they have to say halal, fall away. Because anybody who's in a position that should be able to jump a second time, this is even crazier than jumping the first time. For a person to do tshuva and make a leap, and then at a later point in their life make another leap and come to a whole nother madrege, this is something so extraordinary that there's no rules. There's no rules. There isn't a rule, not a lot of chometz in the house, etc. It's completely beyond the world. Or to say what I'm saying in different words, I'll tell you what I'm saying in other words. And I think this is a good way of explaining Pesach Sheini. Right? It says in Chazal, it says in the Gemara, it says in Zayat, it wrote in Chassidus, that a tzaddik cannot do tshuva. Tzadikim cannot do tshuva. Why can't tzadikim do tshuva? Because the tzaddik is close. The whole motivation for tshuva is far. In other words, the whole idea of a Ba'al Teshuva, the koyach of tshuva, the koyach of tshuva doesn't come because I love Hashem. The koyach of tshuva comes because I hate Avedis, because I hate Ra. In other words, it's a negative motivation. When one is very far away and they feel this incredible distance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the pain of being far projects them to do tshuva. The Rebbe says in Tanya, why when a person does tshuva, do the Avedis become mitzvahs? The Gemara says, why when a person does tshuva, does Avedis become mitzvahs? And the answer is because the Avedis brought him to tshuva. Without the Avedis, if the person had not felt far, they would never come close. So therefore it says in Sfarim, it's mashma in the Gemara, and in the Zayar, and in Hasidus, that tzadikim can't do tshuva. Because the difference between a tzaddik and a Ba'al Teshuva is, a Ba'al Teshuva is running away from bad, and a tzaddik is running to good. And there's a very big difference between a person who's running away from bad to a person who's running to good. It says in the Gemara that no, it says in Chassidus, based on the Gemara, no is strong. If two people are running, one is running from danger and the other one's running to a treasure. Chassidus says, as a matter of fact, that the one running from danger is running faster than the one who's running to good. Because a negative motivation is stronger than a positive motivation. When you're running from evil, the impetus, the thrust that you get because you're running from evil is always going to be stronger than when one is running towards good. And this is the difference between the Ba'al Teshuva and the Tzadik. The Ba'al Teshuva is running from evil, and the Tzadik is running to good. And therefore it says in Sfarim that a Tzadik cannot do Teshuva. But then it says in the Zohar that Mashiach is going to teach Tzadikim how to do Teshuva. One of the ideas which is discussed in the Mamarim of the Rabbi. Mashiach is going to teach Tzadikim how to do Teshuva. That even though a Tzadik is close, Mashiach is going to find a way to create the motivation in a Tzadik that the Tzadik should jump, even though he's not jumping from bad. Or to say it differently, because in a very Eidel Ha'ofen, the Tzadik can also find how he's jumping from bad. And that's the type Pesach Sheini. Pesach Sheini means the second jump. Pesach Rishon means the first jump. The first time a person jumps, before they jump, they were in Mitzrayim. After they jump, they're out of Mitzrayim. So the first time they're jumping, the power of the jump is motivated by Mitzrayim, by something bad. Pesach Sheini means I'm out of Mitzrayim, I'm a free person, and I'm jumping a second time. What motivates a person to jump a second time? That it's impossible. You can jump once, you can't jump twice. Until Mashiach comes. Mashiach is going to teach how even the tzaddik can do tshuva. Mashiach is going to teach that a person who's already jumped once can jump a second time. This is the inyan of Pesach Sheini. Now, of course, that's not the pshat of Pesach Sheini. That's a pshetel. I just made up a dvar teira on Pesach Sheini because the taich Pesach Sheini bepashtus means that I missed Pesach Rishon, right? I missed the first Pesach. If I missed the first Pesach, then I have to bring a second Pesach. But the fact of the matter is that we all celebrate Pesach Sheini every year. We all had a Seder this year. This coming Friday and Thursday afternoon, this coming Friday, we're not going to say Tachnun because it's Pesach Sheini, because every Jew celebrates Pesach Sheini. Even Yidden who brought the Pesach Rishon, even Yidden who had a Seder and Pesach Rishon, Pesach Sheini is a Yom Tov for everybody. So spiritually speaking, the concept of Pesach Sheini means it's a jump after a jump. I've jumped once, and when Pesach Sheini comes, I'm jumping a second time. This is, so to speak, an insight, a thought, a pshetel about the idea of Pesach Sheini. Which leads me to the next point. According to what I just said, it comes out that Pesach Sheini, if what I said is true, and that's a big if, Pesach Sheini has a special connection to Mashiach. Pesach Sheini has a special connection to Mashiach. What's the special connection Pesach Sheini and Mashiach? Because only Mashiach teaches a tzaddik how to do tshuva. Jumping a second time is the idea of a tzaddik jumping. So I want to tell you this. The story of Pesach Sheini is in the Chumash, right? The story of Pesach Sheini is in the Chumash. Now there are many stories in the Chumash. And every story which is written in the Chumash is a lesson. But the Chumash doesn't tell stories because they happened. The Chumash tells stories because they're Teira, Milashon Eira, they're lessons in life. Pesach Sheini has an unusual characteristic which you don't have in the Teira. Okay, now girls, you're all listening to me. I'm sure you're all paying attention to everything I'm saying. Now I'm asking you a question and I want you to give me an answer. Tell me what is unusual about Pesach Sheini. I know only of one other case in the Torah where you have this. Tell me what's unusual about the story in the Chumash of Pesach Sheini, and it happens only one other time in the Chumash. And I'm going to give you a hint.
Wait. Moshe have to ask Hashem?
That's not the answer that I'm looking for. That's more than twice the Chumash. Okay, you're... That's right. So what's unusual about these two stories?
But the Yidden themselves came to ask for it.
The answer is they had to complain. Pesach Sheini would not have happened if Yidden did not complain. Now, the Chumash is full of Yiddish complaints, huh? the Chumash is full of Yiddish complaints. Pashas Pesach Sheini is in Ba'al Teshuva. Just go, if you turn one page in Ba'al Teshuva, you have a complaint after a complaint. You have Misayanim, you have Kivsat Tava, you have Miriam, and then the next parsha you have Meraglim. It says in the Chumash that the Yidden complain 10 times. What's unusual about Pesach Sheini is that the Yidden complain, and if they don't complain, they're not going to get what they're asking for. And when they complain, the Eibusha says they're right. Now, I don't know anything about gambling, and I thank God I don't know about gambling. Because I don't know, if I would start to gamble, I don't know if I'd be able to stop. But you all have heard, there's a concept called gambling. Right? Let's not talk about whether it's halachically sound or not sound, whether it's a good habit to have or not a good minhag to engage in. But people who gamble play odds. Right? People who gamble, they get information, and they see what are the chances of me being right, and that's how they place their bets. If you were a gambling person, and you had a complaint to the Eibishter, would you or would you not voice your complaint? You have a situation. What's a situation? You miss Pesach Rishon, you want to be Makar Pesach Sheini. Or to say it differently, Pesach Rishon exists. That a person who's not close to the Eibishter can jump and come close to the Eibishter has been established. But you're a tzaddik, and you're close to the Eibishter. So you're missing out on the opportunity of doing tshuva. You have not a chance to jump. So you want to say to the Eibishter, it's not fair. How come only those who are far from the Eibishter can jump? Why can't those who are close to the Eibishter also jump? But it's not going to happen unless you complain. Now, what happens if you complain and you're wrong? What happens if you complain and the Eibishter says, excuse me, stop complaining? It's going to be very unpleasant, right? When the Eibishter, when Yidden complain about all the things they complain about, why did we leave Mitzrayim, and we have no water, and we have no food, and we have no protection, every complaint blows up in their face, including the Meraglim. What's the Meraglim's complaint? The Meraglim's complaint is, forgive me for saying this, girls, we want to stay in Williamsburg. We want to put walls around ourselves, and there shouldn't be a world. And the Meraglim are wrong if they go into Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, so if you're a betting person, and you have a taina to the Eibishter, that only the people who were far got to jump. The people who were close didn't get a chance to jump. So if you were a gambling person, would you take this risk? No way in the world you're going to take this risk. No way in the world. If you miss Pesach Rishon, or again, the way I'm spinning it, I'm creating a whole new pshat. Pesach Rishon happened. You did not participate in Pesach Rishon. Why? Because you're a tzaddik. You're not a Ba'al Teshuva. Comes a month later, and you did not have a chance to jump. You did not have a chance to do tshuva. And now you feel like it's not fair. Why did I miss out on this opportunity to jump? Because I'm a tzaddik. That's not fair. Why should a tzaddik miss out an opportunity to jump? And the Eibishter is saying nothing. If you keep quiet, nothing happens. If you complain, and you don't know how the Eibishter is going to respond to your complaint, either the Eibishter will respond to your complaint and say, they're right, and let's make a Pesach Sheini, that Tzadikim could also jump, or the Eibishter is going to say, what kind of business is this? You're complaining, stop complaining. Here's the bottom line. If you don't complain, it doesn't happen. If you do complain, you're taking a great risk. So now I want you to go back. Yeah, you mentioned B'nai Slavchad. I want you to go back to B'nai Slavchad. I want you to go back to the Yidden who were Tmeim L'Nefesh Adam when they brought the Korban Pesach and the Shana HaShenis, and understand what's really the story of B'nai Slavchad. What's really the story of Pesach Sheini? What's the story? The story isn't that the Eibishter said they were right and gave them a Pesach Sheini. The story isn't that the B'nai Slavchad were right when they claimed we're going to lose. Why shouldn't we get why should our father not get his inheritance? And the Eibishter says the daughters should, the daughters, when there's no boys, the girls inherit all by themselves. What is the story really? The story really is the courage of people to complain to the Eibishter. And complaining to the Eibishter is not like complaining to your principal, right? There is zero margin for error. If you complain and you're wrong, you're slammed down to the mat. You're finished. you're punished and you're reprimanded and you're pushed out, and for ever and ever it's written in the Torah, you're one of the complainers. But if you complain and you're right, you change the Torah. If you complain and you're right, you add a new pasha to the Torah, which changes the Torah forever. So now I want you to rethink what is really the story of Pesach Sheini. And again, you mentioned it and you're absolutely correct. There's a strong similarity between the complaining of the people who couldn't bring the Korban Pesach, the Pesach Sheini story, and the Bnei Tzlafchat. What is the story about? I'll tell you what the story is about. The story is about really meaning it. That's what it's about. In order for the Yidden who were Tamil and Nefesh Adam to come to Moshe Rabbeinu and say Lo Menigora, it had to be negea to them till the etzem of the neshama to be in Korban Pesach. There's no way a person, to use English, who could take it or leave it, yeah, okay, it was Tommy, I couldn't read the Korban, would risk filing such a complaint. You would never do it. If the Eibishter tells something and you get left out, now you don't want to start, you're starting with the Eibishter. To complain to the Eibishter has zero margin for error, right? The Eibishter shows no emotion, the Eibishter gives no warning, and the Eibishter certainly doesn't give second chances. You are pushed out, you're missing out on an opportunity that everybody else has. And you say, INF, it's not fair. And you want to protest. You want to say, why am I being deprived? But you understand the stakes, right? You're a gambler. And of course, that's the whole point. If you're going to gamble, you'll never do this. You don't take, this is not a risk. You're weighing the two sides. On the one hand, why am I missing out on this mitzvah? On the other hand, who wants to start up with Atma Ein Sof? The only way the Bnei Tzlafchat could have protested and said, Lama Nigara, why should we lose our Yerusha? The only way the Yidden who were Tamil and Nefesh Adam in the Midbar, who couldn't do the Korban Pesach and the Tezvav Nisan, could have protested because they were missing out on the Korban Pesach, is because it was so important to them. It was so important to them that every risk was worth it. And that's the real story of Korban Pesach, is not that the Eibishter gave a mitzvah. Korban Pesach is about a mitzvah. Korban Pesach is not only about a mitzvah, Korban Pesach is about an idea, right? What's the idea of Korban Pesach? As Nito Kain Fafal. Korban Pesach teaches that a Jew is never lost, never missing out on a Korban. But Pesach Sheini didn't happen because the Eibishter had a good idea. Pesach Sheini didn't happen because the Eibishter woke up and they said, okay, we're going to give Yidden a second chance. Pesach Sheini happened because people complained. Lama Nigora. You see, and this is a nakuda. This is a nakuda, yeah? And you should know, you could see this also in people's relationships with the Rebbe. I saw a video, where a guy was getting married, and he was not a Lubavitcher, but he had shaychus to Lubavitch, and the Rebbe was having yechidus for Chos and Kala, and he came to 770. He came to 770 to be by the Sicha for Chos and Kalas, and he missed it. He came late. The Rebbe spoke to the Sicha to the Chos and Kalas, and the Rebbe started giving dollars to everybody. The Rebbe was already leaving, and he ran in, and he ran over to the Rebbe, and he said to the Rebbe, I missed it. I came late. And he sort of was trying to tell the Rebbe, I feel terrible that I missed the bracha and the sicha. The Rebbe said to Chos and Kalas. And the Rebbe answered him and says, came on the tzvishpet. That was the Rebbe's answer to him. It's never too late. And the Rebbe gave him $1. Now the way I saw that video, you can watch it. It's gem. I've seen the video more than once. The way I saw that video, a guy comes late. Yeah, he's supposed to be by Yechidus at 8 o'clock. He comes, it's 8:45. The Rebbe's finished. He runs up to the Rebbe. He should keep his mouth shut. Schweig. He tells the Rebbe, I missed it. Why did he tell the Rebbe I missed it? Because it was so important to him to have been there. It was so upsetting to him that he missed it. That by saying to the Rebbe, I missed it, he wasn't expecting the Rebbe to give him another sicha. This was his Lama Nigara. This was saying, why did I miss it? You can't do that unless you really mean it. You know? The Rebbe is giving dollars and you come late. Okay, I missed it. But if it's negeya, if it touches you till the mitzvah nefesh, then you say something. And when you say something, then you have Pesach Sheini. There's a lady who's a shlucha, who tells a story about herself. I've seen it on film. It's not such a secret story. The lady's name is Mrs. Eisenman, I think. She's a shluch in South Carolina. From home, she's a biderman. Her brother's the shliach in Vienna, Austria. So her sister, Allah Shalom, was Blisovsky. They lived on President and Kingston, where now is Gambo's, upstairs, yeah? The mamish, one of the best locations in Crown Heights. The house was a market. People were coming and going. They were feeding people. Anyway, it's Hoshana Rabbah. It's Hoshana Rabbah. And the Rebbe's giving lekach. She came from Israel. And she's helping her sister. They're cooking and they're cleaning and they're cleaning up. And she keeps saying to her sister, I want to get lekach. And the Rebbe's giving lekach all day. The line for lekach then, by the way, at Hoshana Rabbah, the Rebbe gave men and then the Rebbe gave women. The line for lekach used to go down Eastern Parkway till Union, up Union till President, and down President till Kingston. So she could look out the window and see the line. To make a long story short, a whole day she was helping her sister. And she kept looking out the window and the line was still there. Anyway, they finished cleaning up. She walks out. She doesn't see the line. So she runs down President from Kingston to Brooklyn because she wants to catch the end of the line. She gets to the corner of Brooklyn. There's no line. She runs down Brooklyn from President to Eastern Parkway. She turns on Eastern Parkway. There's no line. She runs down Eastern Parkway to 770. She gets to the front of 770, and the Rebbe's walking out of the sukkah. She missed the Rebbe by 30 seconds, 45 seconds maximum. The Rebbe just finished giving the last lady lekach, and they was walking into his room. She's standing there at the foot of the steps of 770. She spent the entire day cooking and cleaning so other people should have food to eat Yom Tov. All she wanted was a shtik of lekach. And she missed it. She says, I stood there and I just welled up with tears. She was so upset that it was too late, finished. Suddenly the Rebbe spins around. It turned out, does 180. And when the Rebbe turned around, there wasn't a mistake. She didn't say a word. She didn't complain. The Rebbe turns around. The Rebbe looks straight at her. Then he turns to Rabbi Groner and he says something to him and he goes into his room. Rabbi Groner calls her and Rabbi Groner was so angry at her. And Rabbi Groner says to her, the Rebbe said, wait. He'll come out in a few minutes and he'll give you lekach. So she waited, and a few minutes later, the Rebbe came out of his room. He went back into the sukkah and he gave her lekach. By the time she got lekach, a whole line had formed and the Rebbe gave everybody lekach. So what's the story? So of course, from our end, as Hasidim, the story is the Rebbe had Ruach HaKodesh. The Rebbe has his back to this girl, and this girl is upset, and the Rebbe hears that she's upset, and he turns around and says, I'm going to give her lekach. But that's not the story. That's the story from our angle. The story from the Torah's angle is Lama Negara. That for a Jewish person, a boy or a girl, a man or a woman, a mitzvah should be so important, that if this was a risk, if they were gambling, they would never take this risk. Never. Because you're going to start up with the Eibishter. The Eibishter says no, and you say, excuse me, it's not fair. For a person to come to Hashem and say, Lama Nigara. Right, the Bnei Tzlavchad had no brothers. The Eibishter announced that Yerusha goes over to sons. You want to complain about equal rights and feminine rights? That was not their issue. The Eibishter said men is men. But they have no brothers. So the issue is, why should our father lose his Yerush? It's his. And they say to Moshe Rabbeinu, Lama Nigara. And the same is true Pesach Sheini. A group of Yidden are Tamei. And of course, especially according to that opinion, that the reason they were Tamei is because they were carrying Yosef's remains. They have no time to become Tahir. They have no chance to prepare themselves to be Makav and Pesach. When they said Lama Nigara, they created Pesach Sheini. Or to say it in different words, it says in Rashi, that the Eibishter was going to teach the halachas of Nachlas, the halachas of Yerusha. And the Bnei Tzlavchad were zeicher that it was taught through them. Right? And I'm going to say this here too. The Eibishter was going to teach the mitzvah Pesach Sheini. these people were Zoicha, that it was taught through them. In other words, Hashem has a Torah. Some people are Zoicha that a certain parsha, like the story of Yisrei, that Yisrei parsha achas potato. Yisrei adds a parsha to the Torah, the parsha of Atatechazeh. If not for Yisrei, the Eibishter would give it anyway. But Yitrei was Zoicha that because of him this parsha and Torah was given. The Yidden who complained, Lama Nigara was Zoicha, that the parsha Pesach Sheini is theirs. The B'nai Slavchad were Zoicha, that because they complained, how come Lama Nigara Shem Avinu B'teich Mishpachte? Why should our father lose his Yerusha? They were Zoicha that Parshas Nachlas was given in their schus. So the real story of Pesach Sheini is not the matana that the Eibishter gave. And of course, basically the matana is Pesach Sheini. On a deeper level, the matana is netakim fa'afal. It's never too late. You can always correct, right? Even if it's lachem. But according to how I started today's speech, the Pesach Sheini means a second jump. Not a second chance to jump, but a second jump. That means to say that Pesach Sheini means that even a tzaddik can jump. That a Ba'al Teshuva who was jumped once can jump a second time. And the truth of the matter is, that doesn't happen until Mashiach comes. Only Mashiach teaches Tzadikim how to do tshuva. Only Mashiach teaches a Ba'al Teshuva how to do tshuva again. This chus happened because a group of Yidden thousands of years ago had the guts to complain to the Eibishter. And in order to have the guts to complain to the Eibishter about the rules that the Eibishter makes, you have to really mean it. You would someone just had a question and it disappeared. Put your question back up. Someone just had a question. Put your question back up. I don't see it anymore. I'll try to read it and respond to it. When the complaint creates the Seder, you understand? And the truth of the matter is, Yerusha. Rivka, Yerusha is a mitzvah Seder Raisa. The halachas of Yerusha, of inheritance, of mitzvah deraisa. I don't have time to give you a long arichas, but there's a rule in Torah that davar shebemammon t'nayim work. When it comes to anything in Torah to do with money, you're allowed to change conditions and to make a t'nai and change the rules, with one exception. When it comes to Yerusha, you're not supposed to do it. The Eibishter said Yerusha goes to men, and you're not supposed to interfere. There's a lot of ways of getting around it that people use all the time. But Yerusha is a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah that will belong to the father to go over to the sons. So it's a mitzvah. They introduced the mitzvah that there's no sons that goes over to the daughters. And that's not the pshat. If there's nobody else, you give it to the daughters. There could be brothers. The daughters come after the sons. It's a mitzvah that Yerusha should go over to the children. So it's mamish a mitzvah. Anyway, so this is really the story of Pesach Sheini. The story of Pesach Sheini is the complaining. Now, of course, the chap is, how do you know when it's good to complain, and how do you know when it's not good to complain? So it's like the Pinchas story, right? What's the Pinchas story? There's a guy doing an Aveda, and he's a Nasi B'Yisrael. Everybody else is standing around, doesn't know what to do. Pinchas kills him. If Pinchas is wrong, what happens to Pinchas? Pinchas is killed, his family's wiped out, he's shamed to the end of time. But Pinchas knew this was right. He didn't take a risk. He wasn't gambling. He knew this was right. If Pinchas did not know this was right, he couldn't do it. When the Yidden complained, Lama Nigara. When the B'nai Slavchad complained, Lama, those are the same lashon, Nigara. Forget that wording in the pasuk. Our father's name from his family. The only way to have that complaint is to really mean it. And to really mean it has to come from the deepest places in the neshama. So I just want to say this. Tafshin and Aleph, that means 29 years ago, the Rebbe spoke of Sicha Pesach Sheini. And the teichen of the Sicha of Pesach Sheini was, Loma Nigara, we don't have Mashiach. The story of Pesach Sheini is a story about Loma Nigara. Why should we, it's not fair, why should we miss out? So the Rebbe said, Loma Nigara is, why should we miss out on the Gula Amitas Vashlema? This was the Rebbe's shtur. We spoke about it, a big tumult, that people should scream Lama Nigara. I think what you have to appreciate about this Sicha is that you cannot say to the Eibishter Lama Nigara unless you're 1,000% sure that the complaint is correct. The Bnei Savchar complained because they knew this was the right thing to do. They didn't necessarily know it in their minds, although Rashi says, Chachmaniyas, they were very smart. But this was much more than Chachmaniyas. This was that an akudah, that a pintala of Hasidus that was very deep, that made them know that now you have to protest. And the same is true in Pesach Sheini. The story of Pesach Sheini is not only about the fact that the Yidden were given a Yom Tov, but there was a group of Jews who knew in their etzem that when the Eibishter gives a mitzvah and they are missing the opportunity to this mitzvah, they have to complain. So when the Rebbe says to all of us that we have to scream, Lama Nigor of us Mashiach, the Gula Amitas Hashem doesn't come, there's an echus to it. It's not just get up and scream. I do that all the time. I make a living screaming. Yeah, I scream at people. I scream at myself. I scream at myself for screaming, and then I scream at myself for screaming about the fact that I'm screaming, and so on and so forth. Yeah, Ala Madreges Mishagas. You cannot. If a person screams at Moshe, a person screams Lama Nigora, you have to be like the first person who screamed Lama Nigora. The first people who screamed Lama Nigora took an unbelievable risk. They took this risk because to them it wasn't a risk. It was a truth. It's impossible that the Eibusher should give a mitzvah that I can't do. And the mitzvah was negeya. The mitzvah mattered to them so much, they were able to cry out Lama Nigora. The Rebbe says Mashiach has to be negeya to us so much that we could cry out Lama Nigora. I remember once, the Rebbe was talking about infant Askonis. And the Rebbe told the story about the Chafetz Chaim. The Rebbe mentioned the Chafetz Chaim more than once or twice in the Sichos. The Rebbe told about the Chafetz Chaim. It's a very interesting story. It's a famous story, but the Rebbe told by Fabringen that the last years of the Chafetz Chaim's life, the Chafetz Chaim lived in Poland. I mean, Russia was very terrible for Jews. Poland was worse. Poland was very, very anti-Semitic. It was a new country. It was a poor country. It was full of Jew haters. Poland was. And there were all kinds of gzedas. In Poland, they wanted to make a gzeda against shchita. It's a big war. They wanted to outlaw shchita. So Yidden would not be able to eat meat. So there was some gzeda, and the Chafetz Chaim was the Zakan Hagoinim. The Chafetz Chaim was very, very old. I mean, some say the Chafetz Chaim passed away, he was past 100, but he was for sure in his 90s. Chafetz Chaim was very, very old. He was a tzaddik. He was a very spiritual man. And they came to the Chafetz Chaim to consult about this Gezerah. And the Chafetz Chaim discussed with them how they should go to the government and what they should say. Anyway, they went to the government, they had a meeting, they talked. Nothing came out of it. They failed, they looked. So they came out of the meeting and went back to see the Chafetz Chaim. They came to the Chafetz Chaim, they told the Chafetz Chaim that they failed, and the Chafetz Chaim started to scream at them. I could hear the Rebbe screamed, why didn't you faint? The Chafetz Chaim asked them that when they went to the government and the government didn't give them what they wanted, why didn't you faint? So the Rebbe asked Akasha, what kind of question is this? A person could faint on cue? I'm asking you. A person could faint on cue? 1, 2, 3, faint? Chafetz Chaim said, why didn't you faint? Because the Nishgehalten Bachalish. So the Rebbe said, you don't understand. What did the Chafetz Chaim mean when he said, Havas at Nishgehalisht? Favos is the Zach Eich Nish Gewen Azene Geya Azizot Chalish. You can't faint, but if it matters to you, admitzi anefesh, and you can't do anything about it, you will faint. And that was what the Chafetz Chaim was saying. You went to a meeting, you met with government people. How much did the issue matter to you? If the issue had mattered to you the way it was supposed to matter, volte gechalisht. And if you would have chalisht, this what the Rebbe explained all this. Everything I just said, the Rebbe said. And that's the real story of Pesach Sheini is Lama Nigora. A group of Yidden who feel like the Eibishter disincluded them, and they cried out Lama Nigora to the point that they're ready to chalish, and they were zeiched that because of them we have a new mitzvah. The mitzvah Pesach Sheini. And again, like I told you, my pshatel, Pesach Sheini doesn't mean if you missed the first Pesach, you get a second one. Pesach Sheini means you jump once, and you get to jump again. In other words, you already did tshuva, and you can do tshuva a second time. You're in Madregas Tzadik, and the Mashiach had come, and even a Tzadik will be able to do tshuva. Somebody just asked me where this came from. Oh, about the Chafetz Chaim? I heard it from the Rebbe. I was at a Farbrengen, and the Rebbe said the story. I can hear the Rebbe screaming. I was there b'shas Maaseh. I don't know, Memvov, Memzayin, Yene Yoren. But the Rebbe spoke about the Chavetz Chaim many times with unbelievable reverence. Anyway, that's a story. Okay, girls, I will see you on Thursday, IYH, Mitzvah Hashem. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, don't forget to eat matzah. Don't forget to eat matzah.